Your 3% raise this year was a pay cut, not a small one either. Inflation ran close to that same number. So you worked 12 more months, took on more responsibility, and ended up exactly where you started. That is not an accident. That is how the system is built. And I get it. A raise still feels like winning. Your paycheck number went up, HR sent the congratulatory email, your manager told you that you earned it. I am not saying you didn't. You probably worked harder this year than last. But feeling like progress and being progress are two different things. And companies are very good at engineering the first one without giving you the second. Here's the mechanism. Most companies budget raises as a percentage, typically 3 to 4% a year for someone performing well but not promoted. Inflation over the last few years has averaged somewhere in that same 3 to 4% range, some years higher. So the math looks like this. You got a 3.5% raise, prices went up 3.2%, and your real gain is 0.3%. On a $60,000 salary, that is $180 a year in actual purchasing power. That's not a raise, that's a rounding error dressed up as one. But it gets worse when you look at what full-time actually costs you in hours. A 9-5 is sold to you as 40 hours a week. It never is. Add a 30-minute commute each way, that's 5 hours a week gone before you've done any work. Add 30 minutes of getting ready, another 2.5 hours, now you're at 47.5 hours for the same $60,000. That means your real hourly rate just dropped by about 16% compared to what your salary implies. Nobody adjusts your pay for that. You're just expected to absorb it as the cost of having a job. Then there's the part that keeps you there even when you know all this. Golden handcuffs, health insurance, 401k matching, PTO that accrues with tenure. None of that transfers if you leave. So even when the raise doesn't beat inflation, the fear of losing that benefit stack does the job of keeping you seated. Companies know this. They don't need to pay you more. They just need to make leaving feel expensive. And here's the piece that never gets said out loud in the offer letter. A salary has a ceiling, but your effort doesn't. You can work 10% harder and still get the same 3% raise because you're being paid for your time, not your output. Compare that to equity, to owning even a small piece of something that grows. If you put $200 a month into an index fund averaging 7% a year instead of into loyalty to a company, in 10 years that's roughly $35,000 built from compounding. That's money working while you sleep. Your salary doesn't compound. It resets every January and asks inflation to take its cut first. Think about it this way. Take two people, both making $60,000, both getting a good 4% raise this year. Person one spends nothing extra, banks the raise, feels fine. Person 2 also spends nothing extra, but inflation was running 3.7%, so in real terms, person 1's raise is worth about $180 in today's dollars. Person 2's is worth the same $180 because the math doesn't care how careful you were with the extra money. Neither of them actually got ahead. They both just kept pace, barely, with prices that were rising anyway. The raise wasn't a reward, it was a patch to stop you from falling behind, and it barely covered the gap. Now stretch this across a whole career instead of 1 year. If your raises track inflation almost exactly for 10 years running, your real income in year 10 is roughly the same as year 1. You got 10 performance reviews, 10 rounds of great job this year, and in terms of what you can actually buy, you are standing still. Meanwhile, your rent went up 30 to 40% over that same decade. In a lot of cities, groceries did the same. And the gap between your flat real income and rising costs is exactly where people start feeling like they're falling behind, even though they're doing everything right. This is why the 9-5 raise conversation isn't really about greed or gratitude. It's about structure. The raise is calculated to sit just above inflation often enough that you don't quit. and just close enough to it that the company's costs stay predictable. That's not a conspiracy, it's a budget line. HR isn't trying to make you rich. They're trying to retain you at the lowest cost that keeps turnover manageable. And a 3% raise against 3% inflation does that job perfectly. It keeps you fed, keeps you compliant, and keeps you exactly where you were. Let me walk you through two coworkers, same department, same starting salary of $55,000 5 years ago. One of them stayed loyal. Every year, solid reviews, 3% raise, sometimes 4% if the department had a good quarter. The other one left after 2 years for a 15% bump at a new company, then left again 18 months later for another 12%. 5 years later, the loyal one is making around $62,000. The one who moved twice is making close to $71,000, doing similar work, sometimes less senior work. That gap isn't talent. Internal raises are budgeted to retain you cheaply. External offers have to compete for you, which means they actually pay market rate to win you. Staying loyal costs that first person nearly $9,000 a year by year 5. And it compounds because 3% of a bigger number is a bigger number. So every future raise for the mover gets calculated off a higher base too. Now add the retirement side. Most 401k matches vest over 3 to 5 years, so the loyal employee has a full match locked in. The mover forfeited a chunk of unvested match twice by leaving early, say $2,000 lost each time. Even after subtracting that $4,000, the mover is still roughly $5,000 a year ahead in salary alone. And that number only grows from here. The system isn't rewarding loyalty. It's pricing loyalty at a discount and betting you won't run the numbers. Here's what this actually does to a person living it. You start checking your bank account differently. Not because you're broke, but because the number never moves the way you expected. You do the mental math every January. Tell yourself this is the year it finally gets ahead of rent. Then rent goes up right on schedule, sometimes before your raise even lands. You start resenting a job you don't hate, which is a strange, quiet, kind of tired. It doesn't show up in an exit interview because you can't point to one bad thing that happened. You show up on time, you hit your targets, you smile through the all hands about record growth, and some part of you is running the arithmetic in the background the whole meeting, wondering why growth for the company never becomes growth for you. You start declining things you used to say yes to. Not big things, just a dinner, a weekend trip, because the buffer in your account feels thinner than the offer letter implied. And the worst part is, you can't even point to a villain. Nobody lied to you. The email did say congratulations on your raise. It just never mentioned that inflation had already spent it before you got the check. Here's the part nobody says out loud in the town hall. Raise budgets get set at the company level months before your review even happens, based on projected inflation, competitor pay data, and a target turnover rate finance is willing to accept. If the model shows that 3% keeps 92% of people from leaving, they will offer 3% even in a year the company grew 10%. Your individual performance gets forced into a distribution curve after that budget is already locked. That's why exceeds expectations sometimes still gets you the same 3.5% as someone who merely met them. It's not cruelty, it's a pricing model. And it works precisely because most people compare their raise to last year's number, instead of to inflation or to what the market would actually pay them to walk in the door somewhere else. What I actually think should change is the frame you use to evaluate a job. Stop measuring it by the raise percentage. Start measuring it by real hourly rate, benefits included, commute included, and what portion of your income is going somewhere that compounds instead of resetting every January. That might mean negotiating every single review instead of waiting to be offered something you didn't ask for. It might mean treating an external offer as leverage even in a year you don't plan to leave, because a comparison rate is the only thing that moves an internal number faster than a budget cycle. And it should mean putting something, even $100 a month, into an account that grows on its own. So your financial progress isn't entirely hostage to what one manager decides you deserve in one meeting a year. Your raise was never really about what you earned. It was about what kept you from leaving.